again, highs all near 90. 71 right now. Next news at 9. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan, and filling in for Amy, the Tribune's John Cass on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by the Money Hour radio show, Saturday afternoons at 3 on AM 560, The Answer. Brought to you by Pearshell Financial Group.
Let freedom ring this afternoon at 2 with Sean Hannity, right before Joe Walsh at 5 on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan. And in for Amy this morning, Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. And President Trump had some heads popping off inside the Beltway this week when he had sort of an unexpected day of review on his environmental record as president.
For years, politicians told Americans that a strong economy and a vibrant energy sector were incompatible with a healthy environment. A strong economy is vital to maintaining a healthy environment. We're unlocking American energy, and the United States is now a net exporter of clean, affordable American natural gas. We're exporting all over the world.
Yeah, and Energy Secretary Rick Perry went on with Martha McCallum on Fox to fill in some of the blanks.
This president does care about the environment, and he's doing something about it. When you think about the clean energy that America is delivering around the world, whether it's in the form of liquefied natural gas or whether it's in our renewable technologies, whether it's in our nuclear energy technologies that are going around the world, we're displacing literally tons and tons of old, dirty, burning gas emissions and coal emissions in Europe and replacing them with clean burning natural gas. So the president's got a great story to tell, not to mention the jobs that get created and the wealth and the quality of life that comes with that.
Well, and the data bears out what Rick Perry is saying, just in terms of the fracking revolution, natural gas displacing coal as the number one source for electric power in this country, and that's just in the last 15 years, while the left is obsessed with tilting at windmills, literally, and solar panels while they're at it.
I'm just very upset. I cannot take it anymore.
Well, I understand. Wait, you're upset about the end of the world, or you're upset about natural gas?
I'm upset that the left is upset. I'm upset that it's the end of the world as they know it.
Well, that's exactly the piece that David Korn wrote in Mother Jones, where he offers some harrowing stories about the mental health of scientists. On election night 2016, Kim Cobb, a professor at the School of Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at Georgia Tech, was on Christmas Island, the world's largest ring-shaped coral reef, about 1,300 miles south of Hawaii. She was collecting coral skeletons to produce estimates of past ocean temperatures. I was diving with tears in my eyes, she recalls. She had witnessed 85% of the island's reef perish due to rising ocean temperatures, so she says. Then, she added, after believing Washington would act on climate change and would be acting soon, Trump was elected. And she entered into what she describes, I'm quoting, as an acute mental health crisis after Trump's election. David Korn's lengthy piece is all about climate change scientists and their mental health issues because the administration didn't sign the Paris Accords and isn't engaged in the same sort of alarmism that they are. David Korn writing, it's hardly surprising that researchers who spend their lives exploring the dire effect of climate change might experience emotional consequences from their work. Some of these researchers, including Professor Cobb, have begun publicly discussing the psychological impact of contending with data pointing to a looming catastrophe, dealing with denialism and attacks on science, and observing government inaction in the face of climate change.
You mean like there's only two genders or more? I mean, there's 38 or 45,000 genders? Oh, I'm sorry. Different science. Okay.
They're dealing with a mix of emotions, and we need to be very sensitive to the emotional stability of Professor Cobb and her colleagues. For more on this topic and perhaps a discussion of actual science and separate it a little bit from emotion, we're pleased to be joined again by Patrick Moore, who's the co-founder of GreenPeace. You can catch some of Patrick Moore's musings, which are always informative and sometimes entertaining, particularly when he takes on AOC. His Twitter handle is at EcoSenseNow. Patrick, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Nice to be with you again, Dan.
So what about David Korn? It's the end of the world as they know it, and talking about the emotional reactions scientists had to Trump's election and what they're dealing with by having to exist in a world with people like you who are not predicting end times in the next 12 years as some of them are.
Well, they're just too sensitive, you know. I mean, I think they're lying, actually. I don't believe any of that. Anybody who thinks that the world is coming to an end after thousands of years of predicting the world is coming to an end, it's been going on forever, and I believe these people are taking advantage of the fact that many people are afraid that they're going to die. Well, of course, they are going to die. And we all are, and it's unfortunate in some ways, but I think people are projecting their own fear of death onto the death of the world. And, of course, the world is not going to die, even if all of us died and went away forever. But we're not going to, because we're a very resilient bunch, and we're determined to have children and to procreate and to continue the human species into the future for a very long time, I would imagine, and they just don't get it. The fact is, the wealthiest countries are the cleanest countries. There is simply no doubt about that. Also, the wealthiest countries are the ones who have the lowest population growth and therefore are not contributing to the increase in human population, which is going to level off one of these days in maybe 20 or 30 years, because almost every country now is mechanizing its food production so that you don't have 80% of the population growing food, and you don't have to have 12 kids in order to do the labor that's required when you don't have tractors and you don't have fossil fuels. So they've got it so completely backwards that it's very difficult to engage in a discussion with them. But this abject pessimism has got to go.
There's an obsession with those who are predicting end times with carbon emissions. Is carbon emissions the best indicator to make an assessment about whether we're being good stewards of our environment and whether or not human beings are causing temperatures to rise?
Well, let's just start with the fact that fossil fuels were made with solar energy. They are all from life. The coal is from forests, from trees. And the oil and gas, some of it is from forests as well, but much of it is from marine sediments, including plankton, falling to the bottom of the ocean and turning into oil and gas in the sediments. So basically, fossil fuels are perfectly natural. They are organic in the sense that they are made of carbon, because organic chemistry is the chemistry of carbon, the chemistry of life. And so carbon dioxide is actually the basis of all life, and people should start understanding this. There is not too much carbon dioxide. It's only at 0.04% in the atmosphere, which when they say 400 parts per million sounds like quite a lot, but there are 1 million parts in 1 million. And only 400 of them are carbon dioxide. It's actually very low compared to what it has been in the past. It's actually too low. Even now, at 410 parts per million, plants are basically still starving for carbon dioxide, and it would be a good thing if it went up to 600 or 800 ppm. Even there, it's low by historical standards from the point of view of life's needs for carbon dioxide.
Clearly, Mr. Moore, you are not only a scientific mind, you're also involved in religion, are you not? Because you are a heretic, an apostate, and the religion is environmentalism to produce, or at least make way for larger government and more control. Yes?
Well, yes, environmentalism is one of those isms, which is more of an ideology than a religion, like communism and even capitalism. I think we have our ideologies. We have our beliefs in what system works best. I'm not particularly religious, but I would describe myself as spiritual in that I see the infinity of this universe and of life, the incredible complexity of everything, and that is one of the reasons why we're not able to predict the future like all these people think they can. And I often joke that it annoys me that they think they can predict the future. When I admit that I can't, it makes me look like I'm not as smart as they are. But the fact of the matter is, they're just faking it. It's impossible to predict the future the way they say they can, because it's too complicated and too many different things involved. And as far as I can see, nothing in the weather today, in the world's climate, is anywhere near out of the ordinary with the last 10,000 years of this interglacial period that the Earth has been in ever since we came out of the last glaciation, which was one of about 40 glaciations that have occurred in the last 2.5 million years. People should study the history of the Earth if they want to understand what might happen in the future, because the most likely thing that will happen in the future is over the next 80,000 years, Earth will descend into the next glaciation, as it has done quite predictably, apparently, if you look into the past, over the last 2.5 million years. This is the Pleistocene Ice Age. Chicago was covered in nearly a mile of ice 20,000 years ago, and then it melted, and we came into this interglacial period. We didn't cause the glaciers to melt. We weren't even here. There's nobody living in Chicago, obviously, 18,000 years ago, because it was covered in ice. So if people would just study the history of the Earth, they would feel a lot better about the things and would not listen to these idiots who are predicting that we're going to all die in 30 years.
We're all going to
12
die.
years.
Although Chicago will soon be without human population, but for completely different reasons. The other thing that's interesting and worth pointing out, and that you've pointed out as well, but the people predicting the future. It's easy to predict the future when you just lie about the data if your models turn out to be wrong. And it seems to me one of the biggest indictments of those making apocalyptic predictions is their cheating, and the instances where admittedly a small number of researchers, government employees, places like NOAA, have either been unwilling to share their data or have, no pun intended, cooked the books. And if you have to cook the books, that's sort of conceding that what you're predicting isn't the truth.
Yes, it really has become, I would say the mental illness is the fact that these people think they know what the future is going to be, and they know they don't know. This is the thing. It seemed for a long time that maybe they just were nice people who were misguided. But the fact of the matter is, now that we know that this stuff didn't come true, I mean, they've been predicting the ice would be gone from the poles for 50 years, and it's not gone. It's still there. They pretend that it's still going, but it's not. And so now they are actually lying. The situation is quite dire. For example, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, they say, because no one can see it to check it for themselves, that there is a garbage patch twice the size of Texas in the North Pacific. Now, I went on the internet and I found a whole bunch of illustrations of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. They are all photoshopped graphics on a picture of the Earth or a drawing of the Earth. drawing of the Pacific Ocean. If you go to a satellite photograph of a cloudless day on the Pacific Ocean, all you can see is the Hawaiian Islands. Now, I don't think the Hawaiian Islands are twice the size of Texas. So if there was a garbage patch twice the size of Texas, you would be able to see it quite easily. It's almost the size of another continent. It isn't there. It doesn't exist. It is a hoax. It is fake. And anybody can find this out for themselves. And it's the same thing with the coral reefs, as you talked about at the beginning. They are not dying. The world is in a cold period now, and the coral reefs have actually retreated during the last millions of years into where the warmest oceans are. And the fact is, all you need is one fact to know that this is a big lie, because the most diverse area of corals, where the most species, over 600, exist, and where the highest diversity of reef fish exist, is in the warmest ocean in the world, which is in Indonesia in the Coral Triangle, including the Philippines and the Solomon Islands. Much warmer than the Great Barrier Reef area, where there is not as much biodiversity. So the truth is, corals are perfectly healthy. They would like it if the world was warmer than it is now, like it was for about 300 million years before the onset of this Pleistocene Ice Age 2.5 million